Today on BRStv Investigates, do you want to master lighting for your Nano tank, 40 breeder, or even tanks upwards of 120 gallons using one of the smallest form factor and relatively lowest cost lighting options out there? Well, stick around because today we're going to show you how this nearly $200 AI Prime 16 might wind up being our choice as the most valuable LPS lovers lighting tool we've ever tested, and how we believe a single puck LED may be the most versatile and cost-effective lighting solution out there, whether you've got a small nano tank all the way up to a full-blown SPS-dominated 4-foot tank. Hi, I'm Randy with this Friday's BRStv Investigates, where we experiment on our own tanks so you don't have to experiment on yours. And today we've got the most comprehensive light testing video we've ever done, where rather than limit our light testing to just a 24-inch by 24-inch 60-gallon cube or 4-foot by 4-foot 120-gallon tank, we're showing you nano tank owners some love by testing this AI Prime 16 over more common tank sizes for this small light module, meaning we're adding in tests for a 12 by 12 cube, 18 by 18 cube, and the super common 18 by 36 inch 40 breeder. In today's episode, you'll learn how to master spread, spectrum, and par using the AI Prime 16 HD for tanks ranging from sizes of as little as 7.5 gallons all the way up to 120 gallons. And then we take that data for mounting height, spacing, and spectrum for all 5 of these tanks and provide you with our BRS recommended settings and the par numbers they produce, giving you usable template starting points to dial in your own Prime 16 over your own tank. But before we get too far down the testing road for the AI Prime 16, the first question you should ask yourself is the AI Prime 16 the right light for me and my tank goals? Well, if this low-cost LED light option has piqued your interest as a viable option for your tank, then I'm certain I can answer that question for you right up front. As we're about to show you from the data we collected, if you're looking for a single light fixture around $200 that's capable of providing adequate par and spread from a nano-sized 12-inch cube upwards of a full 2-foot cube area, then a single AI Prime is right for you. That means you'll see how a single AI Prime can not only support a 12-inch or 18-inch cube, but also a 60-gallon 2-foot cube, making it by far the lowest cost light that we've tested to date for this tank type and tank size. However, the real cost savings and value you'll find today is when you see what we're able to do with just a few of these Prime 16s over our 4-foot, 120-gallon tank. But that doesn't mean that SPS-dominated tanks are not possible using primes, because today we're also going to share with you how to use the prime for these higher par demand corals in that little nano 12-inch cube, as well as 40 breeder and our 4-foot 120-gallon tank. This really begins to showcase how versatile the AI Prime 16 can be for all sorts of tank sizes, shapes, and tank type goals. And up next, we're about to show you how to harness that AI Prime's versatility to get the most juice for the squeeze with a performance test to master the Prime 16 spread and light distribution. We start our testing today with a look at mastering the spread of the AI Prime 16, meaning we will identify the optimal number of modules for the tank type, optimal mounting height, and optimal spacing for multiple primes over larger tanks, all with the goal of understanding how to use the prime to achieve an even intensity wrap of light around the corals, which minimizes hot spots, cold spots, or shadows. The first question to answer for spread begins with identifying how many AI primes we recommend for 2 very common tank type goals, and those are lower light demand LPS and Softy tanks, and tanks jam-packed with SPS in higher par demand branching acros. What you'll begin to see as we walk through today's testing is that the AI Prime is certainly capable of providing the necessary par for both of those tank types. However, its real value is in that first tank type filled with LPS softies and polyps, where we recommend using a single AI Prime to cover up to an entire 24-inch by 24-inch area, meaning this one single puck LED module can support your LPS and softy light demands for this entire 60-gallon cube, and most certainly this 18-inch and 12-inch cube as well. That recommendation is transferable to a rectangular shaped tank like this 36-inch 40 breeder and 48-inch 120-gallon tank, meaning As you'll see later in the par output numbers, 2 AI Prime 16s will support those LPS and Soft coral types in both of these tanks. However, you'll find that using 3 primes over that 4-foot tank is going to be the ideal solution for max efficiency in spread and coverage. Now for you SPS stickheads who want to know how we recommend using the AI Prime for wall-to-wall SPS tanks, our recommendation will be to use 1 prime for every 14 inches of tank, meaning that the 12 by 12 Nano cube is covered for SPS with a single light, while our 36-inch 40 breeder rounds up to 3 primes to reach those SPS par goals. And for our 4-foot 120-gallon tank, we find that the best spread and distribution is using 8 primes configured in 2 rows of 4. Although you absolutely could get away with using less primes over these larger rectangular sized tanks by coupling them with hybrid T5 technology. And we might circle back in a later episode to show you just how to do that. But for today's video, it's all about the Prime 16 itself, which means we're going on to answer the next question, and that is, how high should the primes be mounted? Let's find out. To get mounting height right for the AI Prime 16 means to find the optimal height above the surface of the water that provides us with the max amount of even light spread and distribution, which allows us to place our corals in almost every corner of the tank from top to bottom, knowing that their energy needs from the light are covered. We started the optimal mounting height test over our 24-inch cube test tank, which also translates over to our 2-foot by 4-foot rectangular tank, by mounting a single prime at 6 inches above the water with a grid of par measurements taken at 6 inches deep in the tank near the top. We then raised the light 1 inch at a time, testing the same grid of par points until we found an optimal mounting height that reduced any hot spot in the center, increased the par spread in the outer edges, and we stopped the test when we reached or surpassed 15% light spill threshold. We also mocked up a similar mini version of this test for the smaller 18 and 12-inch cube tanks, and I'll show you our findings for those smaller areas after we find the optimal mounting height for this 24-inch cube. Getting right to it with a single AI Prime 16 mounted at 6 inches off the water in this 24-inch area, we see a total average par across the 36 data points of 107 and a center hotspot directly under the light at 462. The outer edges of the tank are 95% less par than the center at just 21 par, and it's not very surprising to see results like these at only 6 inches off the water, given the small form factor of the single puck of LEDs, and it's plain to see that in order to get the most juice for the squeeze in this 24-inch area, we'll need to raise the light significantly higher. After raising the light inch by inch and testing the same 36 par measurements at each stop, let's check in at the prime now mounted at 10 inches, where we're now seeing some significant improvements to that center hotspot, which has evened out to 232, and we've now more than doubled the par in the outer edges of the tank to 47. There's a unique benefit here to point out that even with the prime mounted 4 inches higher than when we started, we've only lost 6% of the total average par, meaning we have the ability to raise the prime higher and continue to improve the spread without seeing significant amounts of light spilling out into the room. Because of that, the test continues upward inch by inch, and we land on our BRS recommended mounting height for a 24-inch by 24-inch area with a prime mounted at 13 inches off the top of the water, where we've tripled the amount of par in the outer edges to now 63, and we've smoothed out that initial center hotspot down to a very even 156, putting us only at a 12% efficiency loss with a 94 total average par. Armed with this data, we can now start to piece together how to best use our Prime 16s for both this 60-gallon and 120-gallon test tank. However, because a majority of you will consider the Prime for tanks smaller than these, we repeated the mounting height test in a 12-inch cube and 18-inch cube. Using a smaller scale version of the same test and stopping when we approached our 15% light spill efficiency loss, we found the optimal mounting height to be 8 inches off the top of the water for this 12 by 12 inch area, like our 12-inch 7.5-gallon cube, and 10 inches off the water for this 18 by 18 inch area, like our 18-inch 25-gallon cube. This actually scales pretty closely to the data we found for our 24-inch cube and demonstrates that for smaller coverage areas, the light can be mounted closer, producing higher intensities, and for larger coverage areas, mounted higher, but with lower intensities. Last up for mastering the light spread of the AI Prime is to answer the question of how to properly space multiple Prime 16s over our rectangular 36-inch 40 breeder and our 48-inch 120-gallon tank. I mentioned earlier that you can use multiple primes over these two tanks to achieve both LPS and SPS dominated tank types, which means using 2 lights on a 3-foot 40 breeder and 3 lights on a 4-foot 120 gallon for LPS. And for jam-packed SPS tanks, using 3 lights on that 3-foot 40 and 8 lights on the 4-foot 120 for optimal par spread and distribution. 8 lights on that 4-foot tank might sound like a lot, but it's effectively just 2 Hydra 64s or 8 pucks spread out over a larger area for better performance. Let's look at that 48-inch tank first and how we tested spacing using 3 and 8 primes for our LPS tank and SPS dominated tank recommendation, where we mount them at the recommended 13 inches off the top of the water from our 60-gallon mounting height test. Then start with them spaced centered evenly across 48 inches. Our goal here for both configurations is to find a spacing sweet spot where we spread that center hotspot light intersection point more evenly out towards the edges until the average par in the left and right edges of the tank are at or greater than 75% of the average par in the middle. Using 3 lights for our LPS tank goal to accomplish this on the 4-foot 120, our primes begin mounted at 12, 24, and 12 inches on center, where we see the outer edges at only 57% of the center average par of 160. Because our goal is 75% or more, we continued to test by spacing the left and right primes further apart inch by inch and found our BRS recommended light spacing for 3 lights over a 48-inch area, with the prime spaced at 8 by 24 by 8 inches on center, where the average par of 94 in the outer limits are within 75% of the center average par at 126. As for our SPS dominated 4-foot 120 gallon tank using 8 primes, we kept the spacing on this one pretty simple by creating 2 rows of 4 primes that were as evenly spaced from front to back and side to side as possible, with 1 prime each covering a 1 square foot area, then actually use the benefit of individual control over each light to create 2 lighting zones where we could decrease the overall intensity of the 4 primes in the center and reduce the center hotspot directly under them where the lights intersect. In doing such, and by adjusting the center 4 primes down to 40% while keeping the outer left and right 4 primes at 100%, we were able to spread the light evenly across the entire length, where the average par in the outer edges at 225 were within 84% of the center average par at 267 for a pretty solid light spread performance using this unique zoning ability. Again, we conducted similar tests for the super common 36-inch 40 breeder using 2 and 3 AI primes for LPS and SPS dominated tanks respectively, except this time we mounted them at the recommended 10 inches off the water from our mounting height test over an 18-inch area. With some adjustments and multiple tests, we found that optimal spacing using 2 prime 16s for LPS tanks, having them spaced at 10 inches on center from the left and right edges for an outer average par within 81% of the center average par. While for SPS dominated 40 breeders using 3 primes, we found that spacing to be 8 by 18 by 8 inches on center across the tank, where we saw the outer edges within 70% of center, which can be improved upon even further by slightly lowering the intensity of the center prime to reduce the hotspot intersection point. By dialing in the spread of our AI Prime 16s for tank types and sizes from nano tanks to full-blown 120-gallon systems, the rest of the data today gets pretty easy and actually applies equally to all 5 tank sizes we just covered. That means next we're looking at spectrum, which is important because finding that correct spectrum is going to help us provide for our corals both metabolic function as well as ideal coloration. In our spectrum tests, we look for 3 things. 1, what does the AI Prime have to offer in individual LED channels and spectrum peaks? 2, how do we use those individual channels intuitively to combine them into a uniform spectrum mix that serves the needs of our corals? And 3, how well does the Prime 16 blend those channels together in our dynamic spectrum test underwater? Kicking off the spectrum and what the AI Prime 16 offers, it has 7 controllable color channels with a UV channel that peaks at 408 nanometers, a violet channel at 411, royal blue that jumps to 450 peak, blue channel with a peak at 471, green at 514, a red channel right on 660, and a cool white channel that has a prominent peak at 443 with a supportive hump or shoulder that crests right around 550. Now that we know what the Prime has to offer for spectrum choices, in this second component of how we use them to create a uniform spectrum mix that meets the coral's energy needs and for eye-popping coloration, we intuitively flip the spectrum switches to create a spectrum blend that provides as wide of a blue spectrum offering as possible between 400 and 500 nanometers, which encompasses a range proven to provide for coral's growth and metabolic needs, as well as shows off that peak color fluorescence. We found that spectrum balance with an approach to adjusting the channels where we set the available UV, violet, royal blue, and blue channels to max, add in some cool white to offset that overtly blue look to the tank, then sparingly use the green and red channels using our best judgment. What that BRS recommended spectrum mix looks like across the channels is the UV and violet channels set to 166%, royal blue and blue to 125%, both green and red channels at 10%, and cool whites to 65%. For a standard to compare this recommended spectrum mix against, we use the commonly known ATI Blue Plus bulb spectrum overlaid on top of our AI Prime blend, and see that it's pretty well represented in that 450 to 500 range and slightly thinner between 420 and 445, which isn't too surprising because this is a range that we saw that just wasn't available in the AI Prime mix of LEDs. However, overall, I feel like we've met our goal of trying to create as wide of a blue band spectrum range as possible that will certainly get the job done. Lastly, up for our spectrum test, before we share our PAR settings and results for the 5 different tank sizes, our dynamic spectrum blending test, where we mount the Prime above our 60-gallon test tank at 13 inches off the top of the water, then use a power head in the tank to create some turbulence and break up the surface. Then we measure 10 spectrum data points from underneath the tank and find out how well the AI Prime lens maintains an even blend of spectrum. Cycling through these 10 data points, we see that although the blending isn't perfect, with jumps here and there in that near UV and above 460 range, it does maintain a decently blended blue band throughout, which is about average performance for most LEDs that we test. That third component in all of our light tests is a culmination of the data that we gathered for spread and spectrum, and using that information to give you direct advice on settings and the PAR numbers they produce so that you have a starting point or reproducible template to smartly set up your AI Prime over your own tank. Because we have a lot of tanks today, to make this component easy to follow, I'm going to give you our settings and PAR data that we collected for each of the 5 tank sizes in order by size, from a 12-inch cube up to a 4-foot 120-gallon tank for both LPS systems and SPS dominated systems as they apply. Keeping in mind that our goal for LPS settings is to fill 70% or more of the tank in PAR levels between 75 to 150, while the goal for SPS dominated systems is to fill that same 70% of the tank in PAR ranges between 200 to 350 if possible. That means for some of the tank sizes, we will need to turn down our BRS recommended spectrum channel settings by equal ratios across all the channels to maintain the spectrum blend. So to help you with that and to give you a point of reference, here's a chart that shows our recommended channel settings at max, followed by scaled down ratios for the settings I'm about to reference. With that, we start with our 12-inch cube with a single Prime mounted at 8 inches, where for our LPS goals of 75 to 150 throughout the tank, we tested 94% of those points within those ranges by using our BRS recommended channel settings lowered to 25%, as previously seen on the chart before. In order for us to hit those SPS PAR goal numbers of 200 to 350 in this 12-inch area, we increased those settings to 90% and again yielded 94% of points in those target ranges. Moving on to the 18-inch cubed area next, with a single Prime 16 mounted at 10 inches for our LPS goals in this size of tank, we used our recommended spectrum channel mix set to 70%, which yielded 83% of the entire tank top to bottom, or 62 out of 75 data points within that 75 to 150 goal. Here we attempted to turn up the spectrum mix to max in hopes that we could hit our SPS dominated target of 70% or more of the tank. However, the AI Prime just didn't have the power to achieve those ranges to our standards, making a single Prime 16 over an 18-inch by 18-inch area a solid choice for LPS, softies, and polyps, or with a mixed tank with SPS placed near the top of the tank. Next up, we have our 36-inch rectangular 40 breeder with our primes again mounted at 10 inches. For our LPS goals on this tank, remember that we're using 2 Prime 16s in this recommended spacing to meet the spread goals, and with that, we set both lights to our recommended spectrum mix of 100% to achieve 81% of points, or 122 out of 150 in that 75 to 150 par range. Following the same approach for an SPS-dominated 40-gallon breeder, yet harnessing the power of 3 lights to get the job done, we space them in our recommended spacing seen here, and again set each of them to 100% of our spectrum channel mix to create a tank that hits 110 out of 150 or 73% of data points in higher par ranges of 200 into 350 from edge to edge and top to bottom. Moving on to our next tank size up with the 24-inch cube, where we have a single AI Prime mounted at 13 inches. Again, we find although a single Prime is not capable of putting out the SPS-dominated par numbers in this larger size footprint, it is, however, surprisingly able to achieve 70% or 76 out of 108 data points in those LPS, softy, and polyp tank par ranges throughout the top, middle, and bottom of the tank, making this lighting option by far the cheapest way to light this size of tank for this purpose that we've ever tested. Last up is our 120-gallon 4-foot by 2-foot test tank with 3 primes mounted at 13 inches for our LPS tank goals. With them spaced in this BRS recommended configuration and set to 100% of our BRS recommended spectrum channel mix, we found an awesome performance of 182 out of 198 points, or 92% of the entire 120-gallon tank at or within our par goal of 75 to 150, making the primes the most cost-effective way to light this size of tank yet. Now we look at that same 120-gallon tank using 8 primes to cover the tank in as much par between 200 to 350 as possible. There are some very unique benefits to using a grid of small puck-style LEDs in this manner. In our case, we were able to mount all 8 primes above the tank, naturally spaced evenly across the entire 48 inches side to side and 24 inches front to back, taking out the guesswork of spacing. And because each individual model is controllable on its own, we were able to use that controllability to create zones or groups of Prime 16s to improve the spread and distribution throughout the entire tank. What that looks like is setting the outer 4 primes to 100% of our spectrum channel mix, while the inner 4 primes were set to 40% to reduce the center hotspot. And what we're left with is a 78% of our entire 4-foot by 2-foot tank filled with the target par of 200 to 350 from edge to edge and top to bottom, which is exactly what we aim for in a wall-to-wall SPS dominated type system. So if there's one thing you heard throughout all of the testing that we showed you today, the AI Prime is one of the most versatile LED lighting options currently out there, capable of illuminating a wide variety of tank shapes, sizes, and types, and almost certainly has a use for a huge majority of reefers out there who are considering them as an option for their own tank. I think the real value of the Prime 16 lies in those LPS and softy tank types, especially when you start to get in those 40-gallon or larger size tanks and the cost savings that this little light fixture can provide. We're talking anywhere from 150 to over 850 in savings by using the Prime 16s over their larger brother Hydra 32 and 64 on tank sizes similar to our 60 and 120-gallon tanks for those who prefer to fill them with LPS, softies, and polyps. Outside of that, there are benefits to using grids of AI primes to get the job done for SPS-dominated systems, even if you aren't focused on going full-blown SPS right away. As we learned today on a 4-foot tank, you can start with 3 primes to create an awesome looking tank, but down the road as your tastes change, or you consider adding higher par demand corals like SPS, you don't have to completely change your entire lighting approach or upgrade to larger, more expensive lights. Instead, your lighting solution grows with you along the journey with little chunks at a time. Whether you're a seasoned reefer or just getting started, the reality is that not all of us are going to get the reef lighting perfect right out of the box, which is just another part of that reefing journey, but leads to that next level of getting your lighting thing done right, which lies in answering that question: how do we avoid the mistakes and pitfalls of lighting your tank properly? Is the secret in mastering that light spread, spectrum, and PAR that we discussed today, or is there more to it than that? If you want to know what the answer is, this top 15 light mistake video is for you.